Russia's artillery advantage has been wiped off the map, as Ukraine destroys it all using drones and other intelligent tactics. For Putin, that means an end to the tactic he's relied on for over 3 years. His artillery is gone, and it's never coming back. Ukraine's Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces, Alexander Syrskyi, reveals the details in a May 12th Facebook post. Since the beginning of the year, the enemy has lost more than 6,000 artillery systems, 6,186. In just a year and 4.5 months, the Ukrainian Defense Forces have hit more than 19,000 artillery systems of the occupiers, 19,236, Syrskyi declared. That's huge, and that's not all. Syrskyi only covers Russia's artillery losses from 2024 onward. If we expand our scope to the entire duration of the Ukraine war, those losses are much higher. According to Ukraine's Ministry of Finance, Ukraine has destroyed 29,617 artillery systems as of June 26th, with 48 of those systems being destroyed on June 26th alone. Some quick math tells us that the Ukraine war has been grinding along for 3 years and 122 days. That's about 1,217 days in total, which allows us to see that Russia has been losing its artillery at a rate of 24 units per day since Putin launched his invasion in February 2022. As we can see from the Ministry of Finance's figures, the more recent loss rate is far higher than the average, suggesting that Ukraine initially struggled to tackle Russia's artillery advantage during the early months of the war. It's not struggling anymore. Ukraine is thriving against Russia's artillery. And it's not just Russia's ancient Soviet-era systems, which Putin has been refurbishing in a desperate attempt to maintain his numbers advantage on the Ukraine battlefield. Ukraine has also been hitting Russia's most modern artillery units hard, showing us that none of Putin's big guns are safe from his enemy. Take the May 11th destruction of a Russian 2S-43 Malva as an example, one of the most modern howitzers in Russia's arsenal. The Malva has a powerful 152mm cannon and an 8x8 wheeled chassis that allows Russia to transport it to wherever it needs to go. Army Recognition points out that this massive gun was built during the Ukraine war, with the first batch being officially delivered to the Russian military in October 2023. The Malva hits hard. It's capable of firing multiple types of munitions, including high-explosive rounds, precision-guided rockets, jamming rounds, and cluster munitions. That makes it versatile as well as modern. It can carry 30 of whatever rounds Russia chooses, and is also equipped with 10 smoke grenades its operators can use to obscure its presence if Ukraine manages to get the gun in its sights. Thermal imaging is also built into the Malva, and its vehicle can shift it at speeds of up to 49 miles per hour for 621 miles. When it comes to Russian artillery, the Malva is among Russia's best, and Ukraine was still able to take it out. On May 10th, drone operators from Ukraine's 413th Separate Battalion of Unmanned Systems managed to track a Malva down to a wooded area somewhere on its territory. A horde of first-person view or FPV drones were launched. Video footage shared on the Ukrainian military YouTube channel showcases what happened next. The footage starts with a shot of the Malva hiding out in woodland. The footage, which appears to have been captured by a Ukrainian reconnaissance drone, shows the weapon has been loosely camouflaged. The video then switches to the perspective of an FPV drone as it draws closer to the Malva's rear. In seconds, the drone hits its target and its screen goes blank. The perspective switches back to the reconnaissance drone, and we see the full effect of the FPV drone's attack. A massive explosion, a Malva taken out in the field. Here's why the specific strike on a piece of Russian artillery matters. It shows us exactly how Ukraine has managed to wipe out nearly 30,000 of Russia's big guns over the course of the last 3 years. When Putin launched his Ukraine invasion, he believed that artillery would give him a battlefield advantage. He was right in 2022. After Putin's initial special military operation failed and his invasion devolved into a war of attrition, artillery was the main weapon he used to batter away at Ukraine's defenses. The tactic was simple: hit the defenses hard and repeatedly with as much artillery as possible to create openings for mechanized units and human waves to roll in. The problem is that Putin lacked the foresight to see how the battlefield would evolve. While he was busy beating away at Ukraine with his artillery, Ukraine was innovating. It was developing new ways to counter Russia's artillery advantage. And that's where the Malva attack comes into play. It's just one of countless examples of Ukraine using FPV drones and similar technology to counter Russia's artillery. Drones are the key. That's according to Forbes military correspondent and senior contributor David Hambling, who wrote on June 19th that Russia's artillery was estimated to outgun Ukraine by a measure of 10 units to 1 when Putin launched his invasion. That early artillery advantage led to Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky repeatedly calling on his allies to provide more artillery shells to Ukraine. For instance, November 2023 saw Zelensky warn that artillery ammunition supplies had really slowed down, which gave Russia more chances to leverage its advantage into snatching more Ukrainian territory. The balance wasn't redressed, certainly not as much as Zelensky would have liked. So Ukraine had to look for alternative means of taking out Russia's artillery, which is where drones come into play. With the development of FPV drones, Ukraine gained a weapon that served as the perfect counter to Russia's artillery. But it wasn't just drones that allowed Ukraine to wipe Russia's artillery off the battlefield. According to a soldier Forbes gives the pseudonym Michael, there are other tools at play. One of the tools is radar. The radar is typically the first step, says Michael, who is a commander of the Typhoon drone unit that fights as part of the National Guard of Ukraine. It can detect the approximate area of a firing position, but it's not precise. Depending on distance and terrain, it may narrow the location down to a 200 by 200 meter area, which is too broad for a direct strike. Those radars include the US-made ANTPQ-36 Firefinder and a series of Ukrainian-made acoustic detectors, Hamling writes. The ANTPQ-36 Firefinder is a mobile radar system that was developed in the 1970s and first fielded in the 1980s. It's capable of detecting mortars, rockets, and artillery units once they're fired, and can locate and track up to 10 Russian weapons simultaneously. It can even predict the impact zone of an incoming shell upon detection of firing, making it as much a defensive tool for Ukraine as an offensive one. As for the acoustic sensors, they're yet another example of Ukraine's innovative approach to its fight against Putin's forces. Tech Ukraine reported on the technology in February, noting that these detectors are developed by a Ukrainian company called Vidar Systems and are capable of determining the positions of Russian artillery and mortars within a 15-mile range. They work using a series of between 5 and 10 acoustic sensors, which are placed in strategic locations around a sector of the front line. Those sensors detect loud sounds, such as the noise made when an artillery unit fires a shell, with the multiple sensors allowing Ukraine to triangulate the position of whatever made the noise. With these types of technologies, Ukraine can approximate the positions of Russia's artillery. But it's up to drones to nail down precisely where Russia's big guns are, as Michael explains. Drones are essential for confirming the exact location of artillery, he tells Forbes. We use fixed-wing drones, some with real-time video, others capturing high-resolution photos, a wide-area reconnaissance. These platforms allow us to assess whether the artillery is still in position and provide up-to-date imagery. Therein lies the first usage of drones. Ukraine uses its unmanned aerial vehicles to conduct reconnaissance, following up on the data provided by its radar systems to scan the surrounding area. Artillery is easiest to spot when it's firing. Muzzle flashes, smoke, or movement of the crew make it visible, Michael tells Forbes. Also, we can identify the artillery by its silhouette, even if it's partially hidden somewhere in the trees or buildings. In covered areas, we look for signs like tracks, disturbed ground, or heat if thermal optics are available. Once the reconnaissance drones have found their marks, the FPV drones are unleashed. And that's what Putin never expected. Michael explains that the sort of counter-artillery fire Putin expected to face on the ground is still being used. Artillery as a counter to artillery hasn't gone the way of the dodo, however. This counterfire is far less effective than Ukraine's drone-based approach. FPV drones, both quadcopters and fixed-wing types, have become more effective than traditional artillery in terms of precision engagement. A high-quality FPV drone for now is the most effective way to destroy the artillery system, according to Michael. And it makes sense. Compare counter-artillery fire to the precision strikes of a drone, and you see why. When Ukraine counters artillery with artillery, there is always a delay. It has to fire a shell from a distance, which can take up to 30 seconds to reach its target. By that point, the Russian artillery may have moved. Tracked monstrosities like the Malva we mentioned earlier can fire off some shells and then drive away at high speeds. By the time Ukraine figures out where the shots came from, the enemy artillery is gone. And even if Ukraine can keep track of the moving artillery, the imprecise nature of these weapons means that it often takes several rounds to hit a target. None of these issues cause problems for FPV drones. Though these drones often require several minutes to arrive at a location specified by Ukraine's radars, they're aided by reconnaissance drones that can constantly scan and search for Russian artillery. Once that artillery is spotted, it can't escape. Drones move faster. They keep track and can follow. As Michael explains to Forbes, with FPV drones, even though the flight time can be minutes depending on the distance, the first strike often hits. With artillery, it often takes several rounds to hit the target, especially in dynamic conditions. What Ukraine has developed is a precision engagement strategy that is far more effective than anything Putin could have anticipated. And that's why Russia has lost so much of its artillery, that its big guns are close to becoming a non-factor in Putin's invasion. Those guns can't hit drones. They're nowhere near accurate enough. It would take a huge slice of luck for an artillery shell to hit a drone, and even if it did, Ukraine could just send another, and another. Each of these drones, thanks to their FPV cameras, provides operators with the real-time footage they need to hone in on the specific part of an artillery unit that needs to be destroyed to take that unit out of commission. And when that direct hit is scored, we see exactly what happened to the Malva. Boom. The results speak for themselves. Beyond the tens of thousands of artillery units Ukraine has taken out, Syrskyi said back in April that Russia's rate of shell fire has been sliced down by nearly half, thanks to Ukraine's drone-heavy approach. Where Russia once fired 40,000 shells per day at Ukraine, it was down to 23,000 shells by the beginning of April. The number has likely decreased even more since then, as Ukraine takes out more artillery units. And that brings us to what all of this means for the war. First, over the last 3 years, we've seen the Ukraine war evolve to the point where drones are now the most important weapon in both countries' arsenals. We've already seen that from the Ukrainian perspective. It's using drones to take out thousands of Russian artillery units and is manufacturing its unmanned vehicles at a record rate. The country has a production target of 4.5 million drones by the end of the year, highlighting how Ukraine sees them as its chief weapon against Russia. However, Russia is no slouch in the drone department. While it didn't innovate their use, it's played an effective game of following the leader to counter Ukraine's usage of drones, especially as its artillery numbers dwindle. It's planning to build 2 million FPV drones of its own in 2025, with production of long-range drones also having doubled from 15,000 to 30,000 in 2025. Throw decoy drones into the mix, which both Russia and Ukraine use to confuse each other's air defenses, and you get the most effective weapon in the Ukraine war. How effective? Well, according to National Security News, drones now account for about 80% of all battlefield casualties suffered by both sides in the war. That means they've officially and fairly easily replaced artillery strikes as the chief casualty causer in the conflict. That pattern isn't going to change, especially as Ukraine uses its FPV drones to take out more of Russia's artillery. The big guns will slowly disappear, making way for more effective and more precise drone warfare. We're already seeing that happening. If the Ukraine war drags on for several more years, Russia's artillery advantage will become obsolete. It'll be all about which country is able to both mass-produce and effectively use its drones against the other. As drones continue to take over, Russia's artillery will become even less effective. Artillery, Russia's god of war, a term that comes from former Soviet leader Joseph Stalin. And it's this declaration that paved the way for Russia's artillery-heavy approach that we see in the modern day. Russia's big guns have always been reliable, powerful, a showcase of ground force the likes of which nations couldn't counter for decades. And in Putin's war, as Business Insider noted in a March 29th article, artillery has also served as a smokescreen. In the Ukraine war, it's good, old artillery more than its Spetsnaz commandos or Sukhoi fighter jets that has been the key to Russian operations, enabling tactically clumsy Russian infantry and armor to advance under bombardments as intense as 10,000 shells per day, the outlet says. It's not wrong. For decades, artillery has enjoyed a direct through line into Russian politics. It's a symbolic weapon, one that represents the Russian ability to cause enormous levels of destruction without any regard for the sheer volume of casualties involved. That's why Putin loves it. He doesn't have to innovate or be tactically superior when he can call upon his god of war. His problem now is that God has proven to be false. Artillery certainly isn't useless to Russia. Even as Ukraine decimates the country's stockpiles, it's still being used as heavily as Putin can manage. However, Russia has been forced to adapt. Ukraine's drone-based approach has forced Russia to adopt the same kinds of tactics. We've also seen Russia increasingly rely on its glide bombs to do the sort of damage to Ukrainian cities and military positions that artillery is failing to do. The god of war is becoming mortal. Earlier, we mentioned Syrskyi's comments about how Russia's rate of artillery fire had drastically decreased. That reduction is being matched by an increase in Ukrainian fire. The situation in December 2024 was that Russia was firing just 1.5 shells for every single shell Ukraine could fire back, according to Sky News. Several factors beyond increased supplies to Ukraine come into play, including Ukrainian attacks on Russian shell production and strikes against the supply chains that bring Russia's shells to the front lines. Combine all of that with the thousands of artillery units Ukraine has destroyed, and you get a god of war that's being wiped off the map. So where does that leave Russia? Despite Ukraine proving the effectiveness of its drones, Russia has no intention of slowing down its shell production. In February, United 24 reported that Russia is making 250,000 shells per month, which amounts to about 3 million annually. But it's seeing the effectiveness of those shells decrease as it loses more and more artillery units. There's no real use in having tons of ammo for a gun that doesn't fire. Russia is also running out of options in terms of where it sources its artillery outside of what it produces itself. North Korea is a still relatively stable ally, with the Open Source Center noting that North Korea has made at least 64 weapons shipments to Russia between August 2023 and March 25. It estimates that these shipments combine to deliver 15,000 containers holding between 4.2 and 5.8 million munitions, including artillery shells. Putin will hope these shipments can continue, though that relies on North Korea maintaining the ability to produce the shells in huge volumes. Iran, on the other hand, is a problem. A supplier of drones, missiles, and artillery shells for much of the Ukraine war, Iran is now dealing with intense pressure from Israel and the US. It's being hit by devastating strikes such as Operation Rising Lion and Operation Midnight Hammer, which have taken out many of its key military and nuclear sites. Right now, Iran can't afford to send much of anything to Russia. We see that when it comes to missiles, as Euromaidan Press reports that Iran only has 1,445 missiles left of the estimated 3,000 it had in its stockpiles before it started fighting against Israel. The odds are that those missiles won't reach Russia now. The same goes for artillery shells and anything else Iran believes that it can use to defend itself against its Western enemies. Artillery hasn't become a non-factor in the Ukraine war yet. Putin still relies on it to cause damage, but Ukraine has clearly figured out how to destroy as many units as possible. Radars, drones, and precise strikes combine to wipe Russian artillery off the map. The odds are that all of this is a precursor to an evolution that will take place as the war drags on. Artillery will become less and less useful, replaced by drones that cause more damage and are far more accurate. The god of war is dying. A new unmanned deity is taking its place. And it's not just drones about which Putin has to worry. Ukraine is on a winning streak that has seen it take out some key facilities on Russia's territory. Find out more in our video covering that streak, and remember to subscribe to The Military Show for more commentary on the latest developments in the Ukraine war.